Hi, this is Bill Latham, the Hytech Lawyer, and today we have with us Niki Black with my case, who's going to talk to us about the cloud. And Niki, just to give the audience some feel for your broad experience, could you tell us how long you've been involved with the internet, the cloud, and the technology of computing?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been interested in computers most of my life. I started my legal career off as an attorney. I was a public defender for 4 years and with a civil litigation firm for 4 years. And it was in '05 that I started to really become involved in the online legal space and the intersection of law and technology. That's when I started my first blog, Sui Generis. It was a law blog, and I still have it, aimed at New York attorneys. And everything that I've done since then has sort of come from that online body of work that I've created on that blog. And I now have since then co-authored or authored 3 books. Criminal law for New York criminal law, which is a Thompson West treatise for New York lawyers. Social media for lawyers, which is an ABA publication I co-authored with Carolyn Elephant in 2010, and cloud computing for lawyers, which is also ABA publication and was published in 2012. And shortly after that was published, I joined my case, which is a cloud-based law practice management company. But and I've always sort of existed since '05 where tech and the legal profession intersect, and I've written about it and spoken about it a lot, and I've been an advocate of the cloud since about '08 is when I first started writing about it. And I really think that that's where the business world is going with computing, and that the legal field obviously needs to follow as well, and that's sort of what this slideshow is about.
Well, Niki, 2008 is obviously not very long ago. We're talking 5 years, but there's been a vast development of the internet for lawyers during that period of time and for everybody. But we hear so much about the cloud, and for many folks, that's a very nebulous term. Well, what is the cloud?
Okay, let me advance in the slideshow here. Cloud computing basically means that your data is stored on somebody else's servers. Rather than servers that are housed in your law office or on your computer's hard drive, there are servers that are owned and maintained by somebody else, and your data is on those servers, and the way that you access it is from a secure internet connection. So any internet-enabled device is what allows you to access your data that's housed on somebody else's servers.
Well, why? That makes me kind of nervous. My data is out there. I don't have control over it. What can I do to make sure my data is secure?
Well, that's why it's really important to make sure that you understand, A, what cloud computing is, B, the vendor that you're going to be using, and C, how they store your data. In my book, Cloud Computing for Lawyers, I list 18 different questions that you need to ask the vendors that I suggest you ask in terms of exercising reasonable care. And actually, let me back up. I think about, at this point, 13 or 14 different jurisdictions have addressed whether lawyers can use cloud computing, and all of them have said, yes, lawyers can use cloud computing, and they've all set forth the same standard, all the different ethics bars that have considered it, which is lawyers need to exercise reasonable care in ensuring that their confidential client data stays confidential and is secure. And the part of reasonable care is making sure that you understand the vendor, which takes me back to where I just left off. You need to investigate the vendor and make sure that you understand how they house your data and what they're doing with it. And a couple important considerations that are not often talked about that I think are important is understanding the vendor's relationship with whoever owns the servers. Sometimes the vendors own the servers, other times the vendors lease the building where the servers are housed, and other vendors, like my case and some of our competitors, use Amazon Web Services. So Amazon owns the buildings and the servers where the data is held, and you have Amazon security backing up the data, which is really the equivalent of trying to get into the Pentagon. If you look up online how Amazon protects its servers, you'll see that it's multi-layered, and you have to get even into the building where the servers are housed is a task in and of itself. So, but you do need to really investigate your vendor, and that's the most important part of moving your company to the cloud.
Now, if I put my legal files on the cloud on somebody else's server, so that I can readily access them anywhere, what stops someone from serving a subpoena on that vendor and getting my data?
Well, there's nothing to stop the government from legally trying to obtain your data, and that's no different than offline. The government can serve. I always say, whether I'm talking about social media or cloud computing, the online and the offline are no different. there's always offline analogies to online issues. And so the government has always been able to access your data, your law practice, your files, if they're going through legal processes to do so. So whether it's getting a subpoena or getting a court order, they can access that. So in my mind, the whole idea of the cloud being not secure for that reason is really a red herring. And quite frankly, one of the biggest issues I've seen, and that a lot of lawyers don't think about, is that email, which lawyers have been using since the mid-90s, is inherently unsecure. There's really no security to email. Email is like sending a postcard through the post office written in pencil. And it goes through multiple servers, and anybody with just half a mind to do it can access any email with confidential client data attached to it if they had half a mind to do it. Whereas when you put stuff in the cloud, it's encrypted, it's housed behind SSL, and it has all this encryption behind it so that it's much harder to access. But quite frankly, anything can be hacked, whether it's your own server or something that's housed in the cloud. I mean, that's just a fact of life. There is no such thing as absolute security. So your job is to make sure that you've ensured that your client's data is reasonably secure.
How do I go about vetting these service providers? Is there somewhere I can go that they've been pre-vetted?
So move forward to the slideshow because I want to get to the benefits at the end. But in terms of vetting, a lot of people ask that when I speak about the cloud. They wish that the bar associations would vet the vendors and give them a stamp of approval. And unfortunately, every jurisdiction, although they've all given cloud computing the green light, but they've all issued different types of considerations. Every jurisdiction's rules are slightly different, and their interpretations of client confidentiality and attorneys' obligations to keep confidential data, whether digital or otherwise confidential, are different. So there's no exact standard that can be applied across all jurisdictions. So there really is no green light in terms of which vendors are okay and which vendors are not. That being said, there are a number of different resources online that compare the offerings of the different vendors. Lisa Solomon has a chart that she created earlier this year on the legal research and her legal research and writing blog. And then there's the ABA's GP Solo section. There was just an article written by Ben Sanchez, and I can't remember the co-author's name, but it was about cloud-based law practice management systems, and they attached an extensive spreadsheet to that article. And that hasn't been publicized or circulated very widely yet because it just came out last month. But it's a really great resource that compares all the features of the different products. But in terms of a green light for the vendors, there's no green light, or there's no place out there that tells you which ones are good and which ones are bad. Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we can when we finish this blog entry, put some links to these resources so people can at least take a look at them.
Okay.
So let's talk about the positive side. What are the advantages to using the cloud for your legal practice?
Okay. Well, first of all, like this slide says, 75% of businesses have already transitioned their operations to the cloud. Lawyers are on the lower end of that, and it also depends on what they're actually transitioning to the cloud. But lawyers are moving to the cloud. The ABA's legal tech survey shows that I think it's something about 35% of lawyers have moved their functions to the cloud, and larger firms have moved even more so. But in terms of the benefits, let me get over to one thing about cloud computing is that it makes it so you don't have to worry about IT. IT no longer becomes your issue. You pay a monthly subscription fee, and instead of having to maintain the servers, having licenses to your software, and then having to install new software every year, and then have your IT person address all the bugs that pop up when you install different software versions that that conflict with each other. You just access your software as a system, SaaS, through the cloud, and you no longer have to deal with that. Which actually brings me to another point which we haven't addressed, but there's document storage and data storage in the cloud, and then there's SaaS, software as a service in the cloud, which are really two different things. Data storage just means you're storing your digital data in the cloud, whether it's documents or otherwise. Software as a service in the cloud means that software is actually being run in the cloud, and you're using that software and storing data in the cloud. So, for example, Gmail is software in the cloud. Word processing, so if you're using Google Apps and using Google Google Docs in the cloud, that's word processing in the cloud instead of Word on your computer. So when you use law practice management systems in the cloud, it's software that runs your law practice that runs in the cloud. So that's one important thing, that when you use software as a service in the cloud, that's when you are able to avoid the IT hassles versus just data storage in the cloud.
Right, and that obviously for any size firm that's a factor, but for a small law firm that would be a tremendous advantage.
Right, because you would have to have an IT consultant come in. You no longer have to do that because you don't have servers to run, you don't have servers to maintain, you don't have to replace your servers every few years. It also allows you to access your data from anywhere. Instead of having to remotely access your data from one computer to the other, your data is housed in the cloud and you can use any device to access as long as it's internet enabled. So, and some of the cloud LPMs, law practice management systems, have mobile apps. My case has a mobile app, and some of our competitors also have mobile apps too, so that you can use your iPad or your iPhone to access your client documents, your contact information. Everything that is relevant to running your law practice can be accessed from the mobile device when you have an internet connection. So that's another benefit. You become more mobile and you have more flexibility, and you are able to run your law practice no matter where you are as long as you have an internet connection.
Well, and if someone breaks into your law practice, or if a fire should occur or whatever, you've got your data in a secure location.
Right, and that's a great point. After Hurricane Sandy, when a lot of the blue shoe New York law firms were shut down, they couldn't access, the buildings were closed and they couldn't get into there, and the electricity was off, so they couldn't access their law firm's data even with remote access. But as long as you had an internet connection and you saw photos of people standing outside Starbucks, so even though the Starbucks was closed, they had their smartphones and they were using the Wi-Fi connections in the Starbucks to access to the internet. And for lawyers that have cloud-based law practice management systems, they could use their smartphones and stand outside of Starbucks. And they were actually, a lot of them reported they were actually able to run their law practices with maybe a one-day delay versus the one-week delay that the larger firms had that didn't have their data in the cloud. So that's a great point. For disaster backup, it's a really good, it's wonderful, it's ideal for that.
So if I'm a kind of a desk-bound, barely have used word processing programs type lawyer who wants to get started with cloud computing, how would you suggest that I do that? What would be the first couple steps?
Well, what I talk about in my book is that before you decide whether you want to move to the cloud, you need to take a look at the systems you're already using. If you're a brand new lawyer who has no software that they're using, that's the ideal situation to move to the cloud, because you don't have any legacy systems in place that you would need to migrate data from. If you have legacy systems in place, you need to look at those systems and decide which ones you want to move to the cloud. And sometimes people want to start with non-confidential data, so they may want to just do billing in the cloud. But ideally, the way to take the best advantage of the cloud is to move all of your client data to the cloud, and then you can access everything and run your law office from anywhere rather than just having one function in the cloud. So, but the best way is to first look at what you're using, where your data already is, what programs you're using, and then try and figure out the easiest ways to migrate it to the cloud. And it varies depending on, like I said, what legacy systems you have in place. Well, I do want to just mention some of the other benefits that I think I left off a little bit, but that cloud computing supports the goal of a paperless law office. Another great thing is to be able to bill on the go and not lose track of your time, because you can enter time from your phone, and you can also do invoicing with clients and billing with clients and allow your clients to pay online. So it really does streamline a lot of the different law firm processes that traditionally take up a lot of time and you can't do as quickly and easily as you can with cloud computing. So I guess what I would leave people with is, here's a couple of resources if you want to learn a little bit more about cloud computing and law practice management in the cloud, and then when you actually put this post up, we'll make sure that I'll make sure to give you those links that I talked about that compare the different law practice management programs and the features of those.
Well, Niki, thank you very much for your time. This has been very interesting and very informative.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.